1441 by unanimous vote. The purpose of that resolution was to disarm Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction. Iraq had already been found guilty of material breach of its obligations stretching back over 16 previous resolutions and 12 years. Resolution 1441 was not dealing with an innocent party, but a regime this council has repeatedly convicted over the years. Resolution 1441 gave Iraq one last chance to come into compliance or to face serious consequences.
And welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, October 23rd, 2021, and we're so happy that you're here with us today. We have a ton of things to talk about. You saw coming in a clip of General Colin Powell, and we're going to talk about that and jump right into that. But before we can talk about that, I need somebody to talk to. So that means Val Atkinson is here. Hey, Val.
Hello, Ed.
And
great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming in with us today. We had talked about last week, Val, having a guest on. We were going to talk about tax policy today. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it in. That's fine. The other thing that you probably noticed is that we're uploading a little bit late today. We're recording later in the day on Saturday, so you may catch it late Saturday night into Sunday. That's fine. We're always topical, so we got clips all the way up until just a few hours ago that we're going to share with you today. But Val, I want to start out with where we came in. The last clip that you saw was Colin Powell talking to the UN talking about weapons of mass destruction. And then we also had a little piece there of the past president, 45, not saying very good things about Colin Powell. But before we deal with that, let's talk about Colin Powell himself. Tell me your thoughts about Colin Powell and how important he is as being the first of a lot of things as an African American.
Well, let me say first that on a personal note, Colin Powell was one of the two military men that I considered my heroes. The first was Chappie James, who was a 4-star general in the United States Air Force. Not that he was my fraternity brother, but because he was a great man and a wonderful military officer, that I considered him to be one of my heroes. And the second, of course, was Colin Powell, who, again, in the footsteps of Chappie James, was a great military man, and he did some great things. I also like Colin because he came up the rough side of the mountain. He didn't go to West Point. He didn't graduate Harvard or Yale, Stanford, or Duke. He went to Community College of New York. He took ROTC, didn't go to West Point. He did all of that when in the military, we call them ring knockers. When you knock your ring on the table, you letting everybody in know that you're a West Pointer and they need to listen to you. You're communicating to other West Pointers. And he didn't have any of that kind of stuff as status, but he rose through the ranks as an African-American, son of immigrants from Jamaica. And he went on to be a 4-star general, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and first Black Secretary of State. Great man.
Yeah, and it's a whole bunch of accolades in there, Val. In the other thing, obviously that stands out is he was a Republican, and when it's hard to find Black Republicans, and the ones you do find tend to make excuses for the Republican racism. I'll just put it on the table. He went against Republicans and supported Barack Obama twice. And then he openly talked about how he did not trust Donald Trump to run the military, which was very brave of him to go out on the limb and do that. One of the other things about Colin Powell, Val, is that his popularity, at one point, he probably could have run for president and had a good chance of winning. Talk to me real quick about why you think he never ran for president. I've heard stories where they say his wife said that, she didn't want him to run. But why do you really think he didn't run for president ever?
My research leads me down the same path. Everything points toward the fact that his wife was really concerned for his life. And that was the primary reason that he did not run for president. Little do people know that Colin Powell received electoral college votes in 2016 for vice president. Some people in Washington classified themselves as faithless electors and voted for Colin Powell, which they were authorized to do. But he could have made a splash. He decided to listen to his wife's wishes and not run for president because of the threats on his life.
Yeah. So, one of the other things about Colin Powell is, he kept some things private, and obviously he kept private his health status. But I understand even up until, just a week or two before he died, he was still out talking to kids, which he really, wanted to do, especially African-American kids, to try to tell them they could be or do or whatever they wanted to do. And that was a major part of his life. But he didn't talk about his health status. And then also it appears there may have been some complications from COVID in addition to his, health status, blood disorder that he had. Some of the folks over on Fox News try to make hay out of that, being vaccinated didn't help Colin Powell. That's the Tucker Carlson, BS that he goes into. And like I said, we already saw what 45 said about Colin Powell. Let's end up with Colin Powell on one of the unfortunate things, which is he got used, didn't he, Val? He goes to the UN. Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, the war hawks over in the Republican Party are itching to fight Saddam Hussein. So they get the most trusted man in America, and a colored one at that, to deliver this speech about weapons of mass destruction. How does that affect Colin Powell's legacy, that speech in the UN?
I don't think it affects it in a negative way at all, because most of the people who knew Colin Powell and understood a little bit about politics in America knew that he was set up and that he was used to deliver this message to the UN, and that people outside the United States would buy it because it was being delivered by Colin Powell. And that's how badly they wanted the backing of the UN to allow them to go in and commit murder on Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi military forces. They wanted it so badly that they used Colin Powell, didn't care anything about his legacy or who he was or what he had done for them or what he had done for the country. They were out to destroy him because they wanted something done for themselves. But people have overlooked that, and they see the kind of a person that Colin Powell was. And I don't think that smear that the Republicans try to leave with him is going to have any kind of lasting effect on it at all.
Yeah. It makes me think about the other Black person that was sitting at the table in the Bush administration and then on the Republican side, Condoleezza Rice. They strike me as two very different kinds of Black Republicans, right? Condoleezza strikes me as always apologizing. She didn't support Barack Obama as far as I know, which she didn't have to. I'm just saying she did not. And then I've never heard her criticize Donald Trump. I mean, maybe I'm not listening enough, but I don't think there's any tape anywhere I can find, Val, that'll show Condoleezza Rice criticizing Donald Trump and this current Republican Party, right? So talk to me about the difference between Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell and where Condoleezza sits in the sort of milieu of, Black Republicans in what her role has been over the years?
Well, I think the biggest difference, as you introduced it as, is geographical. Condoleezza Rice came from an area of the Deep South where Republicanism meant something, especially to Black people, because after all, it was Abraham Lincoln who issued the Emancipation Proclamation to free some of the slaves. And many African Americans were Republicans well up into the 20th century. And many of them are still that way today, including Condoleezza Rice and her family. But on the other hand, you look at Colin Powell, he is a New Yorker, comes from Jamaica. His family were immigrants from Jamaica, went to the City Community College, New York City, attended ROTC. And because New York was a blue state, he ended up being in the traditional mode of Democratic thought. The reason he became a Republican, because most commissioned officers in the United States Army are Republicans. And those who are neither Republican nor Democrat know that if you want to get promoted, especially to field grade officer and above, chances are you need to be a Republican. So that's the reason Colin Powell became a Republican. Didn't have anything to do with the Emancipation Proclamation as it did with Condoleezza Rice's family. But that was the difference, why they took the positions that they did.
Yeah. Well, I want you to hear Condoleezza Rice. Earlier this week, she was on The View, and she was asked to comment on critical race theory. This is Condoleezza Rice, Val.
Critical race theory and what is and is not being taught. I come out of an academic institution, and this is something that academics debate, what is the role of race and so forth. And let me be very clear. I grew up in segregated Birmingham, Alabama. I couldn't go to a movie theater or to a restaurant with my parents. I went to segregated schools till we moved to Denver. My parents never thought I was going to grow up in a world without prejudice, but they also told me that's somebody else's problem, not yours. You're going to overcome it, and you are going to be anything you want to be. And that's the message that I think we ought to be sending to kids. One of the worries that I have about the way that we're talking about race is that it either seems so big that somehow white people now have to feel guilty for everything that happened in the past. I don't think that's very productive. Or Black people have to feel disempowered by race. I would like Black kids to be completely empowered, to know that they are beautiful in their Blackness. But in order to do that, I don't have to make white kids feel bad for being white.
So Condoleezza Rice is worried about little Johnny getting his feelings hurt if we tell the truth about race or whatever. She claims in that clip that somehow white children are being blamed and white folks are being blamed. Current white folks are being blamed for the ills of their fathers. We hear the argument all the time from people who want to apologize. And then, of course, it's always couched in that, well, I never owned any slaves. The new thing, though, Val, is talking about critical race theory. One of the things that Condoleezza Rice could have done, I think, in her comment,
critical race theory and what is and is not being taught.
She gave a little bit of
I come out of an academic institution, and this is something that academics debate, what is the role of race and so forth. And let me be very clear. I grew up in segregated Birmingham, Alabama. I couldn't go to a movie theater or to a restaurant with my parents. I went to segregated schools till we moved to Denver. My parents never thought I was going to grow up in a world without prejudice, but they also told me that's somebody else's problem, not yours. You're going to overcome it, and you are going to be anything you want to be. And that's the message that I think we ought to be sending to kids. One of the worries that I have about the way that we're talking about race
she often tells
is that it either seems
but
so
what's
big
problematic
that
for
somehow
me with
white people now have to feel guilty
it's
for
this whole
everything that
notion
happened in the
that
past. I
somehow
don't think that's
we're
very
hurting
productive.
little white
Or
Johnny's feelings
Black people have to feel
by talking
disempowered
about
by
history,
race.
period.
I would
That
like
nobody
black
seems
kids
to have a
to
problem
be
when we talk
completely
about
empowered,
anybody else or
to know
anything
that they
else.
are beautiful
We
in
can
their
go all the
blackness.
way back to the
But in
Boston
order
Tea
to do
Party
that, I don't
down
have to make white
and
kids feel
say,
bad
well,
for
that was
being
great
white.
because they were fighting the British in oppression and they poured this tea into the harbor or whatever. They, some rich people who drank tea did not want to pay tax. So you were willing to go to war and kill people for it, but they don't want to talk about it like that, right? So you also don't want to talk about slavery. Talk to me real quick about this critical race theory argument and what in the world was she trying to say? Was she trying to say that we're hurting Johnny's feelings? Is that really what she was trying to say?
That's exactly what she was trying to say. What Condoleezza Rice is failing to understand and what she just glosses over is that when you edit history, like she is suggesting that we do, you allow the behavior that has been detrimental to the United States to continue. And that behavior is they pretend, they meaning white people, they pretend that the truth is not the truth. But to make things worse, Ed, if that's not bad enough, they require others to pretend as well. And when you don't pretend like they want you to pretend, then you are a troublemaker. You are a problem. And that's what Condoleezza Rice is saying. You're going to make little Johnny and Miss Becky feel bad about their forefathers. Well, you should feel bad about their forefathers when they hang people from trees, when they kill people in cold blood and get away with it. Why shouldn't they feel bad that their forefathers did this? Why is it that you need to protect them and their feelings? Because if you continue protecting them, Condoleezza, then you may have some of their grandchildren doing the same thing to some of your grandchildren because you're allowing them to continue to pretend. And we need to get this thing out in the open right now and say, stop pretending. This happened, doesn't make you a bad American or a bad human being, but it did happen. And these are the things we need to do to make sure it never happens again. You cannot correct a problem that you refuse to admit even exists. It's impossible.
It is impossible, Val. You're absolutely right. And like I know you're a Civil War buff, and you've been to battlefields. I've done the same thing. I guess we're a little nerdy that way, but it's important to me to understand what happened in places or whatever. And I think we need to talk about that. Again, as much as Colin Powell was a person who had flaws like all people, in the main, he is a real American hero that we can look up to. People on the left and right look up to him. And despite what Donald Trump says, Colin Powell deserves all the accolades that he's been given. Condoleezza Rice is a little more problematic for me. No doubt that she's put into work. She knows Russian history and the former Soviet Union and in the current Eastern Europe, but I just don't like what she's saying about history and how we should look at race. Val, I hear music in the background, so that means we need to take a break. When we come back, I want to switch gears. I want to talk about 1-6. I want to talk about Steve Bannon. I want to talk about Benny Thompson. I want to talk about Barack Obama, a whole bunch of other stuff. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about all those things and a whole lot more. You're watching The Deal.
There's one episode of America's history that is told very differently depending on who you are and where you live. It is the story of our Civil War and what came after.
We have not adequately understood who we are as a nation.
There's a big movement to remove Confederate history. I don't see the pain in the symbol.
I don't think that slavery and Jim Crow should be forgotten.
I'm going to disagree with a common idea that the Civil War was totally about slavery.
You don't really hear the word slavery or slaves in Mississippi. The simple term is whitewash.
In that reconciliation, the nation itself embraces the Confederacy.
All of this tension and anger comes from the erasure of African Americans' history.
We all should learn the real history because we think we know, but we don't.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. We were talking about two very prominent African American Republicans. Unfortunate passing of Colin Powell this week, but also the unfortunate comments of one Condoleezza Rice. In the break, you saw a promo for a program that's going to be on MSNBC Sunday night, the 24th, about the Civil War, Val. Again, very important topic, because one of the things that I don't think that we're being honest about in America, we never have, is American history in the role that slavery and racism played in the Civil War and post-Civil War Reconstruction. And so if you get a chance, that's produced by Henry Louis Gates and Brad Pitt and some other folks. I think it's going to be worth watching. So Val,
let me introduce one little thing while we're on that subject.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Also, when you plan to watch that, folks, go out and pick up a book. It's not a new book, by Ronald Bernstein. Mm-hmm. And the title of the book is The Second Civil War. And it's not about violence or aggression or attacking anybody. It's about inner workings of politics. The Second Civil War is about how Democrats and Republicans can't get along and what they're doing to destroy democracy. And with this time that's coming up right now, Bernstein book is a real jewel that you need to read. It explains a lot of things, how we got here and why. It's called The Second Civil War.
Always here, we give you books to read. You always have assignments on this program. Val, I tell people all the time, we talk about as much about history as we do the current events, because you don't have the current without the past. And not understanding the past is to your detriment, or at least attempting to honestly deal with the past. One of the things we never do in America is deal honestly about the Civil War and then post-Reconstruction. And so we act like everything starts in 1969 after King is dead and everybody's happy, right? Because there's no more trouble after that period. But we know that's BS. Switching gears, but related. We're talking about the Second Civil War and how things are still in turmoil. Val, there on 1/6/2020, 2021.
Yeah.
1/6/2021. There was an actual attempt to overthrow the government of the United States. There's no ambiguity about it, right? And there's a 1/6 committee, select committee in the House. They invited 5 Republicans, only 2 participated. So Benny Thompson is leading that, who's a very honorable guy. Done some work with Benny in the past when I worked at FEMA, because Benny was on the committee that oversaw disaster recovery. And I spent a lot of time in Mississippi. But the task here for the 1/6 committee, Val, is to do something and to do it before time runs out. Can you explain to me what the dilemma is with the 1/6 committee, what they're up against? They've been issuing subpoenas to people, but people haven't been showing up. What is the problem with that if people don't show up?
Well, your system is being challenged at the core level. Heretofore, people have upheld the rule of law by deciding to plead guilty so that we don't have to carry this thing out in court. They've decided to pay restitution, to give back money stolen. They've decided all these things. These were honorable men ensuring that the system goes. Very few times have bad players decided that I'm going to force you, Mr. Law Legal Man, to take me to the mat and go all the way and prove that I am not the good guy that I claim to be. I'm not going to lock myself up in this jail cell and throw the key away. I'm going to make you grab me, force me into the cell, lock me in, and take care of the key. I'm not going to do your job for you. And that's presenting a problem to a lot of Democrats, because these honorable men don't exist anymore, where they say, yeah, you got me. The evidence showed that I did it. I'd like to plea bargain. I'd like to plead guilty, get this thing behind me. Or the big deal that Richard Nixon did and say, effective noon tomorrow, I shall resign the office of the presidency of the United States. I mean, that was a big deal. We didn't have to go to Congress, to the Senate, and get 67 votes to remove him from office. Honorable men. You don't have those honorable men anymore. And that's the problem. Democrats are still looking for it. Talking heads are still trying to convince people. Can't you see all of these things? Because they're looking for these honorable men to come in and say, yeah, you're right, you got me. Let's do it. It ain't happening anymore. The honorable men are dead, okay? And we're still preaching to have them to come back to life and turn themselves in.
Yeah, you know, that is a problem, because I don't see anybody standing up, especially on the other side of the aisle, on the Republican side. Val, here's a clip I want you to look at. This is Benny Thompson talking about what they're trying to do here. And then a follow-on clip of Steve Bannon on 1-5 saying what to expect on 1-6.
To consider a report on a resolution recommending that the House of Representatives find Stephen K. Bannon in contempt of Congress for refusal to comply with a subpoena duly issued by the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol.
Bannon's testimony is seen as critical based on statements he made on his podcast the day before the attack.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen, okay? It's going to be quite extraordinarily different.
Like other Trump allies, Bannon claims his communications with the former president are protected by executive privilege.
So, Val, that's Benny Thompson, you know, talking about the unfortunate task that they have of referring people over to the Justice Department to perhaps issue indictments for contempt of Congress. Doesn't happen a lot.
Example.
Yeah.
Beautiful example, Ed, of how things used to work. 50, 60 years ago, with Bannon on tape saying what he said, he and his lawyer would have gotten together and called Merrick Garland and say, hey, we want to make a deal. I saw the tape. You got me uttering it out of my mouth in my own words. I have no defense, you know, for that. I want to make a deal. Same thing with Spiro Agnew, Nola Contende. He couldn't prove that he was innocent and those kind of things. These are honorable men. But Bannon, he ain't doing that. He's not going to do it. And all of the evidence, you can go get 5 more films, okay? All of the evidence in the world is not going to make him into an honorable man to make him give up the ghost, okay? It ain't going to happen. I wish I could make somebody believe that, because every time I keep hearing these talking heads telling us what Bannon said or what he did, and we got you on tape, they're trying to convince somebody that he's wrong. And Bannon ain't buying into it. And the worst thing is that he's trying to run out the clock. And I know you want to talk about that a little bit.
Well, you had that. It was right at the tip of my mouth. I was going to ask you, so what's the strategy then? What are they trying to accomplish?
The strategy that Bannon is trying to accomplish is get to a point that the courts have not ruled on whether or not that this guy must appear before the 1-6 committee. And if they run out the clock before the court makes the decision, and the Republicans take back the House of Representatives, and the 118th Congress takes their seat on January the 3rd of 2023, the 1-6 committee will go bye-bye. There will be no more investigation. Bannon and the people, the Democrats in the party, everybody will be sick of it, and they'll just throw up their hands and walk away. And it'll get to the point after a while that democracy will put on its last pair of skates. It's about to skate down the road and go off, because you can't have a democracy without the rule of law. You just can't have it.
Well,
and that's what they're challenging. They're challenging whether the United States of America has the authority to do anything that they don't want done. They're saying it's a phony government and you don't have the authority to lock me up. You don't have the authority to tell me I must wear a mask. You don't have the authority to make me do anything with my children. You don't have the authority to do anything because you're not a legal government.
Yeah, and that's the problem in places like Texas. Val, the lieutenant governor in Texas, he's trying to keep up this whole notion that elections are flawed and that it's something wrong, that they need to intervene, and that these draconian laws that they want to put in place have some value. I do want you to look at this little clip here and then tell me what the strategy is of the Republican Party is in relation to trying to cast doubt on voting.
In November 2020, he offered a $25,000 reward for anyone who can identify voter fraud in Texas. Well, he found his winner, and he actually issued that first $25,000 award. Let's see the gentleman on the screen here. It's Mr. Eric Frank. He found that there was actually voter fraud going on. And of course, it was a Republican who voted twice.
So Val, there's a guy with a check for $25,000. And it was based on a challenge from the lieutenant governor of Texas, who says, find me voter fraud and I'll give you $25,000. So this guy found some voter fraud. There was a person who voted twice. He voted himself and he voted for his son, and who wasn't planning on voting, but he voted for Republicans. And the main person he wanted to vote for twice was Donald Trump. Now, there's a famous case in Texas also of a woman who didn't do that. She had been convicted of a crime, thought everything was done, filed a provisional ballot, and went to prison. In prison for 5 years. Mm-hmm. This is a man who deliberately voted twice. The lieutenant governor issues the check, but they haven't said anything about prosecuting this guy like they prosecuted the sister who voted legitimately because it was a provisional ballot. It doesn't mean that it's counted, and it wasn't counted. So explain to me this thing of the lieutenant governor handing out checks for $25,000. What is he trying to do here? Because I don't think he wants to hand out checks for any more Republicans who are found to be voting illegally.
He's trying to sow the seeds and set up a situation that people will believe that there is voter fraud. And he hopes that he'll have to write 10 or 15 more checks for $25,000 each. And he doesn't care really who the perpetrator is, whether it's Republican, Democrat, or independent. He doesn't care. He wants to prove that there is voter fraud. And once he can prove that, then that gives him legs to go in and make some major changes to the voting system as it lays now. Changes to the process and procedures, changes to the personnel who administers the voting apparatus. And this is why he's doing this, to change it, because get back to the reason, why are they doing this now? Why didn't they do it in 1973? Well, the reason they're doing it now is that the United States of America is about to become a country that the people of color outnumber white people. And that is unthinkable to some of these people who call themselves conservatives, because they think that America should be a white, conservative, Christian country. And they see that changing and it's bothering them, and there are no holds barred. They now can do anything they want to do, refuse to do anything they don't want to do, to stop that from happening. And that's why you see all of these, as you call them, draconian measures taking place.
So you mean they really don't care about voter fraud? Then? That it's another one of their ploys to try to hold on to power. Val, I get really concerned that again, people go on with their daily lives and they got to make ends meet, and prices right now are higher, and you got some inflationary pressures. Gas is certainly higher. Some commodities are higher because things aren't being delivered or whatever. And so it's easy to either get people to sit out and not participate at all, or to buy into some of these conspiracy theories or whatever about, the government really not, being on your side, that there's something wrong with government and governance, right? But at the same time, they're the same people who want to tell you what you can and can't read in schools. We talked about that last week. They want to ban books outright in Texas. They want to tell people what they can do with their bodies and all that kind of stuff. Women, what they can do with their bodies. All kind of manner of things that they want to be fascist on one hand, but on the other hand, say that they're protecting democracy, which is such a hypocrisy. Like I said, the only good word for it is bullshit. It's not even close to being something that we should take serious from them. You know what, Val? We're coming up to a place for a break. I hear some music in my ear, so let's take a break, and when we come back, there's a whole bunch more. I want to talk about voting some more. I want to talk about your buddy Joe Manchin and the skinny black dude named Barack Obama. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back after this message.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jacqueline Walters. I've been a practicing OBGYN for 23 years. When my patients ask me whether they should get vaccinated against COVID-19, I tell them yes. If you're trying to become pregnant now or plan to try in the future, you can get a COVID-19 vaccine. There's no evidence that any vaccine, including COVID-19 vaccine, causes fertility problems. I send my patients to the CDC website to get reliable information at www.cdc.gov.
Anything that was ever said, that we've ever talked about, if I'm an embarrassment to my Democrat colleagues, my caucus, the president being the Democrat, the leader of the Democrat Party, Chuck Schumer and all them, and I said, me being a moderate centrist Democrat, if that causes you a problem, let me know, and I'd switch to be an independent.
And welcome back to our next segment of the deal. Look, Val, this is rolling by quick. We're in our final segment, and it's still a lot to talk about. So let's get to it. You saw coming in from the break, Val, Joe Manchin, your favorite politician of late, but because he and his running buddy, Kirsten Sinema from Arizona, keep throwing monkey wrenches into Joe Biden's program. And don't want to participate. And in that clip, it was very interesting what he said. He said, well, if you guys really don't want me, then I'll just be an independent. Now, that was in response to earlier in the week when he said it was complete. Now, he said it's bullshit to a reporter. The reporter was walking beside him when David Corn from Mother Jones had put out an article earlier in the week that said Manchin was considering becoming a Republican. And he said that's bullshit. So he comes back and says that, well, maybe he would be an independent and still caucus with the Democrats. Let's just get down to it. What the hell is Joe Manchin trying to do? I mean, we keep telling him to go be a Republican, and he's fighting that. Why won't he, Val?
Well, Joe Manchin has never in his entire life had as much power as he's got right now. And he's enjoying it. He's having a good time. People are checking with the president. They're checking with the majority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer. They are checking with Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. And then after they check with these three powerful individuals, they have to ask Joe Manchin, well, what do you think about that, Joe? Because based on the way he goes, any idea can fail, any idea can pass based on what Joe Manchin wants, okay? He's enjoying this. He's right in the center. But he knows, he's smart enough to know, Ed, that if he were to leave the Democratic Party and sign up as a Republican, that all of these games that he's playing now with Schumer, Mitch McConnell would have none of it. And he would have to do what he is told as a member of the Republican conference, or he would be placed in no man's land. No committee, no power, no nothing. The stuff he's doing with the Democratic caucus is not allowed in the Republican conference, not allowed at all. So that's why he's saying, I'm going to go Democratic, but I would still caucus with I'm going to go independent, but I would still caucus with the Democrats. Yeah, because you want that power that goes along with caucusing with the Democrats. So that's the game he's playing right now. And he's got him going pretty good.
So you mean to tell me that Mitch McConnell wouldn't want him to be his sidekick, and they could, propose legislation together and hold hands at the podium and stuff? You don't think that would happen?
Not a bit. Not a bit.
I'm joking, because Mitch McConnell rules with an iron fist, right? Is what Mitch says, and that's why he could get Tim Scott, our other buddy from down in South Carolina, to go up and pretend like he's going to work on justice stuff in police reform, knowing full well that Mitch McConnell's not going to let him do anything at all. But I digress. We haven't heard from Tim Scott in a few months. Hopefully I don't hear from him anytime soon, because he caused a lot of damage when he tried to pretend like he was trying to negotiate in good faith on police reform. But I digress. So Joe Manchin is now probably where he wants to be. Like you said, even threatening to be an independent is a problem. And because there's no more, I don't care who he caucuses with. If he's independent, he's like Bernie Sanders, and he's like Angus King, who can go off whenever they want to and not have to listen to Schumer because they're not part of the party. So that's problematic. So Val, let's switch gears. I don't want to run out of time. I want to talk about this guy. He used to be president, fairly popular dude, light-skinned black dude. Let's take a look at him.
And in 10 days, you got a chance to do it again. You got a chance to elect Terry and Paula and Mark and to keep Virginia moving forward. And before we start anything else, I want to remind you, and everybody who's watching, you don't have to wait until November 2nd to cast your ballot.
So that is Barack Obama. And Barack Obama was in Virginia earlier tonight campaigning for Terry McAuliffe. Terry McAuliffe used to be head of the Democratic National Committee. He's been governor down in Virginia. He needs to win. So not only was Barack Obama out tonight campaigning, but Kamala Harris was out campaigning as well. What does that tell us about the power still of the Republicans to invoke Donald Trump? Because Youngkin, the guy who McAuliffe is running against, is a complete acolyte to Donald Trump. He is trying to pretend like he's Donald Trump, and Donald Trump has given him an unequivocal endorsement. And they've been throwing stuff on the table like, oh, the governor doesn't support parents being involved in their children's schooling. They're talking about critical race theory and all kind of other manner of things. So when you pull out Barack Obama, what does that tell us about the race in Virginia, Val?
Anytime you pull out the 44th president of the United States and the sitting vice president of the United States, both African Americans, in a blue state like Virginia, you know things are critical. And the reason that they are so critical is that America has a history of Black folks not voting in off-year elections. And this is worse than an off-year election. This is what we call municipal election time, when you have voting on an odd-numbered year. This is 2021. And most federal elections, all federal elections, are held on even-number years. So it's going to be difficult to get a lot of Blacks out to vote. So Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are doing whatever they can do to get Black folks excited about going to the polls in numbers and helping McAuliffe get across the finish line there, because they don't like the idea of McAuliffe, a Democrat, losing in a blue state that voted against Donald Trump and for Joe Biden, to have him lose to a guy that's supported and endorsed by Donald Trump sends the wrong signal for Democrats. And that's why Democrats are pulling out all stops to do whatever they have to do to get McAuliffe over the finish line.
Yeah. You know, while you were talking about it, made me think about what's going to happen in a state like North Carolina, where we are right now. Somebody's going to have to emerge to replace the current governor, Roy Cooper, who's a Democrat, who managed to win in a state where Donald Trump won, which is, you know, not an easy feat to do. And then all the other council of state elections in North Carolina were really close. I mean, there were toss-ups in most cases. There was no, like, where somebody just got beat like a drum. Democrats could have won some more council of state positions, but they didn't. And they certainly lost stuff like lieutenant governor to that clown that we talked about last week. And it's dangerous for the Democrats if they lose Virginia governorship. The one advantage they do have is they hold the House and Senate in Virginia, right? They hold the legislature. In places like North Carolina, they don't. Which brings me to the last piece of this that I want to talk about, Val, which is redistricting going on. And again, we've been talking to this theme in this segment about elections and voting and all that kind of stuff. That's why the race, I think, with McAuliffe is so important, is that Democrats can't afford to lose anywhere where they already have a seat, because they're going to have a hard time holding on to the House. So, I mean, nobody's saying that the Democrats have a good chance of holding on to the House, but with Joe Manchin threatening to become an independent, that means they don't even hold on to the Senate. So we got trouble, Val, and somebody needs to be thinking critically about what we need to do to hang on. I want to switch gears, Val. Again, this is related. The Republicans have managed to take over the courts as well. We know that Mitch McConnell's strategy was to take over the courts, right? At the federal level, on all levels, from district courts all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they have the Supreme Court. And one of the things that is on the table at the Supreme Court, Val, is abortion rights. Again, I'm gonna play a clip real quick and then we can talk about it.
The U.S. Supreme Court on Friday agreed to hear a challenge by the Biden administration and abortion providers to a Texas law that imposes a near-total ban on the procedure. The case, which the court will hear on November 1st, will determine the fate of the toughest abortion law in the United States. It is the second major abortion case that the court has scheduled for the coming months, with arguments set for December 1st over the legality of a restrictive Mississippi abortion law.
So, Val, we've talked about Texas before. Texas has an abortion law that effectively ends abortion rights because it has that fetal heartbeat thing in there that at 6 weeks, right? And that most people don't even know they're pregnant until after that. So it effectively gets rid of abortion. So the Supreme Court has agreed to hear that case and a case out of Mississippi. Do you have any sort of read on what the likelihood of Roe versus Wade making it in this 6-3 court that's there now? You think it has any chance of staying?
I've been thinking about it and talking to some people who know a heck of a lot more about it than me, Ed. And I walk away with the feeling that the court is likely to come down against Texas's abortion stance, where it is paying people to become vigilantes. And the reason is twofold. First of all, it disallows people to try to do the same thing with the gun argument. But more importantly, it gives the court a little bit of cover and takes away the complaint that they are being overly political, and now allows them to come in and rule positively for the Mississippi plan, which is worse than the Texas plan. If they approve the Mississippi plan, they're gutting and Wade and just reversing the whole abortion thing. Okay, and that way they give themselves cover. They'll give you Texas and take away Mississippi. Either way it goes, people can't get abortions anymore. That, for my money, that's what they'll do, because they've had a history of narrowly tailoring things and going tit for tat, and I'll give you one over here and I'll take away one over there. They're trying their damnness not to appear one-sided, when that's exactly what they are.
Yeah, they're only coming down on one side. I mean, I can see Roberts doing again what he's been consistently doing, is be the man in the middle. But Amy Coney Barrett, she replaces Ginsburg, so him being in the middle doesn't do you any good, right?
It's still 5-4 is still a loss.
It's still a loss. So I mean, you can't even say, well, we gave it a good fight. In the Supreme Court, you lose and you lose and you lose. When it's one vote, it's still a loss. Well, Val, the last thing I do want to talk about is that COVID numbers are a little bit better. People are still dying. We talked about Colin Powell all the way back in the first segment. He died because he had a compromised system, even though he was vaccinated. There are people who are still refusing to be vaccinated, Val. There was a big story in the last couple of days of firefighters in Raleigh, North Carolina, and police officers who were willing to lose their job. There were firefighters in some other cities and police officers who made a big dramatic demonstration of handing in their boots and putting them on the steps of City Hall, saying in this city of Chicago and other places, saying, they weren't going to get vaccinated. At the same time, booster shots are available. So let's take a look at that real quick, and then we'll finish up on that.
Americans now qualify for COVID-19 booster shots. The CDC cleared the way for Moderna and Johnson & Johnson boosters to go into arms. The shots already are widely available at some doctors' offices and pharmacies. Vaccination sites seeing demand for the extra dose right now. About 2/3 of Americans who are currently fully vaccinated are eligible for a booster. And experts say the extra shot is a game changer in the fight against COVID-19.
So Val, now the FDA and all the folks, CDC, say that you can get a booster shot. I think you already have yours. I'm scheduled for mine tomorrow. At the same time, this will be my third one, and there's people that still don't have any. We talked at length about Kyrie Irving last week, who refuses to get one at all. Whatever. Val, I guess we're about to enter the phase with COVID where it's going to be an endemic instead of a pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. Endemic meaning that it'll come back year after year after year. Less people will die because people would have immunity and all kind of other stuff, but there will be people. So it'll be more like the flu. Do we have any hope? Do a whole bunch more people need to die before something's going to happen? Because we know we can't reverse the political nature of this, right? There's some people who are just camped out there and not going to change. What's going to happen in the next 6 months, year on this? Because, like I said, I think we hit the endemic phase of this.
I feel real positive about this one, though, Ed. I think there's enough pressure now. There is a system afoot where people are convincing other people, and people are becoming comfortable with looking around and seeing everybody in a particular location wearing a mask except you. They've become accustomed to standing 6 feet apart. Now you have the CDC and FDA approving a shot for children between the ages of 5 and 11. That's going to do wonders, because now people can deal with childcare, they can go back to work, they can do a lot of other things, but more importantly, a large segment of the society now are team players, and they are in this process with us too. And I think all of that is going to be too much pressure on the deniers and the naysayers. So I look down the road and I see good things happening in the fight against COVID. And you can't ask for anything better than that, because this is a serious thing that has the potential of wiping out the species. People don't realize how serious this is. This could wipe out the species, the Homo sapien species, and you're talking about your right to choose.
Yeah.
Your liberties. What are you talking about when you're talking about the survival of the species?
Yeah, Val, when I hear these police officers with that nonsense, and they're supposed to be out protecting and serving people, and so you telling me you're also willing to risk their lives with you passing on COVID to them? I don't know. Well, you know what? We're getting low on time, Val. So I need to ask you, like I always do, what do we have to look forward to in the coming week? Anything good? What you're working on? Anything you want to tell us about?
Yeah, well, it looks as though I am going to go back to work as a basketball coach with the city of Curry, North Carolina Parks and Rec. We were out of work all of last year, and this is a voluntary position, so don't let me use the word work and scare you. We didn't have a league last year, but we're going to have one this year. I very much am looking forward to it, to rekindle a relationship with the kids and teach a little basketball, a little stuff about getting along with others, stuff that a 13 and 14-year-old needs to know if they're going to be a success in life. So I'm looking very much forward to the upcoming season of youth basketball at Cary Parks and Rec.
Well, that's a good deal. Working with kids is a noble cause. I mean, I don't do it anymore or as much as I would like to, doing track and field and rugby and some other stuff that I'm involved in. I probably need to do a little more of that myself. Luckily, COVID is starting to be on the wane, Val, and you can do some things. This morning, I went out and did the Making Strides for Cancer walk for breast cancer. I do that every year. I've had some people really close to me affected by breast cancer who unfortunately have succumbed to that disease. Currently have folks that I know that are close to me who are battling with it right now. And it's a horrible thing. So get your mammograms, ladies, get your checkups. One of the things that's been clear during this pandemic that people have stopped getting checkups and stuff like they should for all kinds of things, but especially for cancer. So we need to make sure you're doing that. Well, I hear music, so that means that we're going to get out of here. We'll be back with you next week. Again, share this with other folks. Let people know what we're doing here, and we'll see you next week. Go out and do something good for somebody today, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard.
1441 by unanimous vote. The purpose of that resolution was to disarm Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction. Iraq had already been found guilty of material breach of its obligations stretching back over 16 previous resolutions, and 12 years. Resolution 1441 was not dealing with an innocent party, but a regime this council has repeatedly convicted over the years. Resolution 1441 gave Iraq one last chance to come into compliance or to face serious consequences.